Corinthians win, and then there's the match-fixing scandal that now involves Napoli. And finally, we now know the Champions League draw for the next phase of the competition. This is the World Football Show, and this is Sports Tonight Live. I'm Mina Rzouki, your host, and today I'm joined by none other than Andy Brassell, the European football expert, and a man who probably knows more about football than anyone else I've ever met.
Anyone?
I honestly think so. I honestly think so, Andy.
We've had Raphael Honigstein on this show, you know.
Okay, fine. You're equal to each other. Happy? Right. Tell us, how have you been?
Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah, are you surprised by Corinthians winning against Chelsea?
I wouldn't say that shocked. Or partly because I watched the show last week and listened to John Cotterill.
Well, yes, of course, because that was the thing. Perhaps we have a VT of it now, so we can show you 40 seconds of what exactly happened then.
The thing about Corinthians is that they are very difficult to beat. They specialise in 1-0 wins, which is what they got in the semi-final of this competition against the Egyptian sides. They are the masters of this stuff. They are very good at containing a game. If they take the lead, Chelsea will have problems because Corinthians really do adapt their game around taking the lead, sitting back. Although that when they do sit back, it allows the opposition to attack them, which could, of course, cause them problems. But, you know, they are the... well, they won the Brasileirão, the Brazilian League, last season. They won the Libertadores this season. They conceded only 4 goals.
Oh my
so
God.
Chelsea may have problems scoring against Corinthians.
I mean, have you seen anything like it? Perhaps we can even ask John when the world is going to end, since he knows how to predict everything. We've got him actually on with us at the moment, and perhaps he's very proud of himself there. Hello, John. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Well done on predicting the right scoreline. It was 1-0. Perhaps had Fernando Torres actually converted his chance, then we would have been talking about a different scoreline. But Corinthians, they did as you expected them to do?
Well, you know, I said there's a good chance that they could manage a 1-0 win, and that's what happened in the end. But it's a typical Corinthians performance. I think they played well, Corinthians. I think Cassio, the keeper, made all the difference. But as you said, Chelsea had the chances. And on another day, as their manager said, Chelsea could have walked away with the championship. But Corinthians did, you know, a typical Corinthians performance.
Hello, John. It's Andy here. The question is, how are Corinthians going to build on this? They've been linked quite closely in recent days to Alexandre Pato. We know Brazilian clubs through sponsorship from outside sources maybe have more means in the transfer market than they did before. How do you see this going?
Well, they have more money here. She said the economy in Brazil hasn't really been affected by the economic crisis, which has affected the UK and the United States and Europe, and Brazil seems to be immune to this kind of thing. And there's plenty of money around. As you said, it doesn't come from the clubs. The clubs don't really earn the money to buy new players or to buy their own stadiums. It comes in from big sponsors. And Corinthians have signed a new shirt deal. They've also got a new sponsorship deal, which has brought a lot of money into the coffers there. So they can afford players like Alexandre Pato. But if they do get him, they're only going to go for 50% of his economic rights, which is kind of normal here in Brazil, but a little unusual when you're looking at it from a European perspective.
Also, I wanted to talk to you actually about, well, the fact that Rosenior would love to be going there. And now that Lucio is going to Sao Paulo, how is that being looked at over there in Brazil?
Well, I see it as another big name coming home, which, you know, Lucio is a big name, but is, you know, it depends how you look at it, really. You get these kind of stars or former stars who are at the end of their career and they decide, you know, it's time to go back to Brazil. Now, the clubs can pay wages which they could not pay before, and Lucio falls into that category. For me, you know, he's a good player, he's a decent player, but he's 34 years old. He's going to be 35 next year. We had the same thing with Seedorf, Clarence Seedorf, who went to Botafogo this year, who had a good year, Seedorf. In a relatively weak club, he had a good year, but people like Diego Forlan did absolutely nothing at all at international, really struggled big time. So Brazil isn't always the easiest place to come and play, especially for big names who are not quite as big as they used to be.
John, of course, one going in the opposite direction is Lucas Moura, who's going to Paris Saint-Germain. Tell us a bit about his last couple of weeks in Brazil, the sort of legacy he's left, how people expect him to do in Paris as well, because, of course, he was very emotional when it came to the moment to leave.
Okay, well, the first thing to say about this emotion, it's such a typical thing here. You know, from my perspective, and I've been here a long time, I see every single footballer who leaves the club here in Brazil, not everyone, but 99%, they always come out, they always manage to cry on cue. And for me, you know, it's always a little exaggerated. His whole departure has been really, really exaggerated. Now, I happen to know that a documentary has been made about his move to PSG, so whether or not it was part of that, you know, I don't really know, but I think I've said this before, he hasn't really done a lot at São Paulo in his career. It's a relatively short career, only 2 years, when he came through the junior ranks. He actually started at Corinthians, and São Paulo grabbed him when he was a youngster. He won the Sul-Americana last week, maybe, if Tigres of Argentina don't complain, because, as you may remember, that the game was called off at half-time and São Paulo were declared champions. But he hasn't really done a lot. He has a lot of potential. He has a lot of basic skills. He has a lot of pace. But I don't know how well he's going to really do at PSG. Only time will tell on that front. But yeah, potential is there. The skill is there. But for me, you know, he still has a lot more to prove, I think.
I think also he's just sort of a different type of Brazilian player, you know, his physical stature and everything like that. But we do hope he will come good in Europe. But I wanted to also just briefly ask you, Brazil dropped to 18th place in the world rankings. What's your opinion on that?
Well, this is, you know, I tweeted this as the Philly Power effect, rather tongue-in-cheek, because this is where Palmeiras finished. They finished in 18th and they got relegated when Philly Power was in charge this season. Although he wasn't actually in charge when they went down, but it's his legacy really at the club. The reason they're there, of course, is because Brazil are playing friendlies, or have played friendlies apart from the Olympics recently. Because of the host nation for the World Cup, they don't have to qualify for the Confederations Cup. So a lot of friendlies against relatively weak opposition most of the time, and this accounts for their worst ever ranking in the world.
Right, okay, thank you so much for joining us. I do apologise that it was such a short space amount of time, but John, we would hope to speak to you again about everything that happens in Brazil. But let's fly over to Europe and to Germany, because I think the hot topic is, of course, Schalke dismissing their coach, and now they've put in place the youth team on Keller. Hope Stevens, does he really deserve to be knocked out, well, to be dismissed?
Well, I think it's a bit reactionary and a bit quick, but I think people outside Germany sometimes, and it's something we talked about on the show before, don't really appreciate what a massive club Schalke are. They're absolutely huge. There's an enormous amount of pressure there. So I think there are a few other things at play. The fact that in recent weeks they've disappointed, despite the fact they've brought in some good signings over the summer. Neustädter, Tranquillo Barnetta, who's taken a bit longer to establish himself. And you know, I think you've got to offset that against the fact that they have progressed in the Champions League, which is pretty good. But the main thing I think that's really hung over them is the doubt over Huntelaar's future.
Right.
You know, that's something that makes everyone at the club feel pretty uneasy. You know, they gave him this offer, which was more than any other player in the history of the club has been offered, and he said, well, no, maybe I won't. I'm keeping my options open. And it looks increasingly like he's going to leave. But I think they need to find direction pretty quickly. Of course, they've got a pretty clement Champions League draw comparatively. So, you know, if they can get it right in the next month and a half, they could still have a really good ending to the season.
So basically you think that you know, the fact that Huntelaar may not want to stay, there's also some issues I understand regarding Holtby with the team. But, you know, let's be honest, they haven't really been performing since about, you know, the end of November. But that's it, really. I mean, considering their performances in the Champions League, I understand that it's been, you know, let's say it's been a bad 6 weeks for them.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
But, you know, is there no reason to think that they can get over that, surely? I mean, with the amount of talent they have, especially the creativity they have on their wings, that there wasn't a chance that they could get back if they just reunited after the break?
I would have thought so. And what I particularly like about Schalke and the Schalke squad at the moment is they have that really great blend of silk and steel. They have the power in the middle with Jermaine Jones, with Neustädter.
Yeah, who of course hasn't really been performing that well either in the last month.
Exactly, but we're only talking about the last month. He started the season very well, and you know, you have Kyriakos Papadopoulos behind him. You have all that attacking talent up front, which we know all about. And Stevens is someone who knows the club really well. So I think it's a bit of a risk, given that, you know, if they haven't got someone else lined up already, you know, it's a bit of a worry what they could do with the rest of the season, because you know, they want to get back into the Champions League. They want to be getting into the Champions League consistently. And if you look back over past years, it's something that Schalke haven't managed to do. They've qualified for the Champions League, gone and spent a stack on new players, and then they haven't replicated that feat. They really need to stay in the Champions League to make the club financially self-sufficient, to get a run of success going. And there's a real opportunity to do that this season because there's such a gulf already between Bayern and the rest. You know, the other Champions League, 3 Champions League places are there for the taking. And if they don't make that top 4, I think that's a big problem for them.
It will be a huge problem for them, but someone that looks like, you know, well, a team that does look like it will reach there is Bayer Leverkusen. And I think that everyone's been, as much as, you know, they are a big club and everyone expects them to always fulfill their potential, there is an element of surprise that they've managed to do so well. Also with the fact, you know, that they have kept on to kept hold of Schürrle and Bender, and they've refused to sort of give it up because they're like, you know, we're building something, we want to make it special, and we're going to go out. Of course, they defeated Bayern Munich. That came as somewhat of a great triumph for them.
Well, they never win there, do they?
No, they never do. So it was like it was
psychological
a great moment.
boost. Yeah.
The only defeat that they suffered, Bayern Munich, you know, in the league is against them. That's something that's brilliant for them. So do you think it's a case of, well, what I wanted to ask is, they are 9 points off, of course, Bayern, you know, but so they can't really mount perhaps a tough challenge, but will they stay in the mix, or will Dortmund eventually take over, or perhaps?
I think Dortmund are favourites to overtake them. I mean, Dortmund are only, what, 2 or 3 points behind them anyway. So I don't think that's something that Dortmund can't make up. For Leverkusen, it's about staying in the Champions League places. I think that's really, really important, and preferably the top 3, an automatic qualification. What I think is interesting is if they can stay just about the same distance from Bayern that they are. When Bayern get back into the Champions League, of course, they started this last season very strongly, didn't finish it as strongly, certainly domestically. I wonder how that will affect Bayern. And, you know, we've always looked at Leverkusen and that Neverkusen tag, how that they always manage to muck it up. But there's absolutely no pressure on them on this occasion, because, you know, there's a distance, there's the sense that they are going to muck it up as well. And, you know, they've got players who've been there for a while who are finding a little bit more and performing. So you looked at Schürrle and you looked at Bender, but also Stefan Kiesling has been great. Gonzalo Castro's had a brilliant first half of the season. So, you know, if these players can keep that level up, you know, maybe they can give Bayern a few jitters.
Well, can Stefan Kiesling keep that up, or will he be someone that they might have to sacrifice eventually?
Well, I think they're going to
top scorer in the Bundesliga.
Sure, but they're going to try and not sacrifice players mid-season, I think.
No, there's no chance of
figuratively. We don't want anything happening in the centre circle. But I think, you know, unless you get a humongous offer, you're not going to sell anyone in January. So I think that's the position that they're in, and, you know, I think they're in a good position to take it on.
Right, and lastly, you know, let's discuss Bayern for a few minutes, because they are probably one of the most consistent sides in Europe, barring, let's say, Barcelona and Juventus. But they are a side that keep on ticking. And now no one knows, because, of course, up front they have Mario Gomez, they have Mandzukic. They're all such top players at the moment that there's no even reliance on specific players, because they have the backup plan to take them through. Is there any stopping them?
I don't think so in the league.
You really don't think so?
And, you know, you were talking about...
Well, they did fall spectacularly last year.
Yeah, they did, but I think the fact that they had that setback to Leverkusen and that they recovered pretty quickly from it, I think that's quite important. And the fact that Dortmund really failed to take advantage when Bayern were having that little wobble, I think that's quite important. I think the defence looks a bit more sturdy this year. I wouldn't be surprised to see them reinforce in the winter transfer window, especially with the injury to Badstuber. I think that's probably quite important. That's the one area where you think maybe they could get tripped up, because I think what you hit on there about the collective, the fact that everyone really has to play for their places, but everyone feels that they're part of it as well, is so important for a club like them, who are running really a squad game rather than a first 11 plus 5 or 6 more is really important. I think you look at the way Toni Kroos has become more and more important, the way that Ribéry has completely bought into the team ethic, and he's been thought of as a quite selfish player in the past.
No, he's hard working.
He's not at all now. I think those things are really important. You'd have to say they're heavy favourites to go on. Like I said, what I'm really interested to see is how, especially with maybe a few choice reinforcements in January, how they balance getting a bit further in the Champions League this time. Well, obviously they're going to have to do pretty well to get further, and balancing what they do domestically as well.
Well, we will talk about what they will do in the Champions League, and of course they did draw Arsenal, but you can join us after the break where we'll be talking about all the draws coming up. Welcome back to the World of Football show here on Sports Tonight Live. Of course, this morning they announced the next fixtures for the Champions League draw, so we know who everyone is going to be taking on, and there are some unbelievable matchups. None other than include, of course, Manchester United versus Real Madrid, Shakhtar versus Borussia Dortmund, PSG Valencia, my personal favourite, Juventus Celtic. What about you? What do you think is the greatest one that you're looking forward to?
Well, I think Dortmund versus Shakhtar is really interesting because they're both such dark horses.
Yeah.
And they were both
energetic football.
Yeah, they were both brilliant during the group stages. I'm really interested to see how that.
Who do you think will actually win that one?
Dortmund. I think because Shakhtar have come a very long way, but you just think Götze, Royce, slight problems decision making in central defence for Shakhtar sometimes, and not the greatest goalkeeper in Piatov.
No.
So I think that is mainly the sort of small details on which it'll be played.
How much Shakhtar, they create a lot of opportunities, but there seems to be something about their finishing that it doesn't quite hit the nail on the head for how many chances they create. They need to be finishing more of them.
Having said that, Luis Adriano scored one he shouldn't have scored in
Nordsjælland. They know how to make the most of situations.
I'm not sure that's completely justified.
But
yeah, as we were saying in the break, it's the train spotter's dream.
The train spotter's dream. Well, they do have Fernandinho and Willian, who has now been offered apparently all these packages from the likes of Chelsea and Juventus. I wonder whether it's okay with his passport.
You make it sound like they've sent him some biscuits or a couple of tins of soup or something.
No, it's a hamper. It's a Christmas hamper from Harrods. No,
yeah, you've got to go the full distance if you want to sign these big players, haven't you?
Yeah, you've got to go the full distance. I don't know whether he'd move. I don't know why he would need to. Shakhtar is doing a splendid job at the moment of just dominating both in the league and Europe. I'm sure he'd want to test himself. But Real Madrid at Manchester United is, of course, the one that everyone is talking about. Yeah. Finally, Manchester United have a big club to contend with, because it does kind of seem like they coast through in the early stages with sort of like easier matchups than the rest of them.
Well, if you compare it to last season, they didn't really have much of a chance to play anyone big, so they didn't get out of the group stage. But I think it'd be very interesting. I think what's the most interesting question about this is how it will go off in midfield, because that's where everyone says that Manchester United are weak, and it's something they managed to busk a little bit in the Premier League. They've let in too many goals this season. I don't think there's any doubt about that. That is something that could be a real problem against Real Madrid. And you look at all the strength that Real Madrid have got in the centre of the park, and you can say La Liga's gone now. That has gone. There's just absolutely no doubt about that. So it's always been about the 10th European Cup since they got Mourinho, and now because of that, more than ever, the sense that the league's gone, the sense that he's going to go at the end of the season, and it's going to be a new era for the club. But yeah, I think it's got to be.
But the sense of it, you're all like this is just a Real Madrid victory.
I think you have to say they're the favourites. I think you really do.
It's when you say that, but I don't think so.
Let's look beyond the names of the teams,
yes,
and look at who's actually in the teams.
Okay.
I mean, how are Scholes and Giggs going to cope with Khedira, maybe Modric, Xabi Alonso, Essien will be there, Ozil, Di Maria, And that's before we even get to the Cristiano situation.
But forgetting that aside, you know, like...
And because everyone will say it's about Cristiano.
It is all about Cristiano.
And justifiably so.
Exactly.
Because he's been such a key player for both clubs.
Sure, but think about this. I mean, this is a cup, or this is a tournament that sort of, you know, the unlucky, there's always the unlucky team, there's always the lucky team. We're talking about a Real Madrid side that have conceded so many goals from set pieces. I mean, this is a team that has absolutely no idea how to defend against a corner. And, you know, let's be honest, if Manchester United managed to get a couple of those on their way, wouldn't they be able to do something? We're talking about Robin van Persie, Rooney, who will work so much when it comes to Champions League. I know Real Madrid want this more than anything, but perhaps they will, and you know what, this is sort of the best matchup for them, because a smaller team would make them complacent, and they really need to be all geared up for this, and it's a huge match for Mourinho. But with the way that their defence is going at the moment, I mean, can we really say that this isn't going to be an easy thing? You know, I mean,
no, I don't think
Ozil is not on the top of his game. Di Maria is being accused of being complacent.
Yeah, well, he's not been in great form in recent weeks, or recent months, I think it's probably fair to say. But I just think, I don't think it's going to be easy, but I just think in the key areas, Real Madrid have got a little bit more. And when they've conceded goals, when they've conceded daft goals in the Champions League this season, they've managed to get over that. If you accept those 2 games against Dortmund, and you could argue that, you know, they should have lost the game at the Bernabeu, but they managed to come back into that with the late equaliser, of course. You know, you look at the options they've got between Benzema and Higuain. You know, they're not really that far behind United in that sense. Of course, I always think it's about the relationship between Benzema and Ronaldo. You know, Benzema is not only a goal scorer; he's something that makes it happen for Ronaldo as well.
I don't think he's been performing that well this season.
Well, he's not been at his absolute best, but he's one of those players you know he's going to fire at some point during the season. Yeah. And yeah, there's the whole Ronaldo factor as well. Knowing him and knowing how to stop him are 2 completely different things. And I always get the sense that if Real Madrid make mistakes where they do concede a couple of goals, they'll always fancy themselves to go on and get over it. And I think if you look at the slow starts that Manchester United have had in a lot of games this season, I think you look at Reading in the Premier League, particularly Braga in the Champions League, or away to Cluj, that cannot happen at the Bernabeu, because they could be out of the tie after half an hour. Of
course, no, I do agree with you. But let's talk a little bit as well about poor AC Milan. I just want to know if they will ever
get... AC Milan.
I just want to know if they are ever going to get another team other than Barcelona. I mean, that's really... always they're lumbered with Barcelona, which is, let's be honest, the most fancied team in the Champions League.
How it looked for them ahead of the group stages, you know, accepting the financial difficulties at Malaga, with Zenit, who everyone was expecting to do a bit better, but were really quite wan and pale in the group stages. They're lucky to be here. You know,
they are lucky to be here.
If you go back to the first match day, where they drew 0-0 with Anderlecht at the San Siro in like one of the worst European matches I've seen this season, I think it's fair to say.
I actually think the reverse fixture was just as dull.
Oh, come on, Mexis overhead kick.
Well, that's about it. The goals were good.
Yeah, for sure. But I think you have to say that, you know, there's some sort of appreciation that they're there, that they've got a bit more money in the club coffers, and they're competing in a tie like this.
Well, you never know. They might be able to perhaps sell off Pato and sell off Rubinho and get themselves Balotelli, and then that will be a very interesting matchup.
Oh, well, cup tied, of course. That would be the problem. Although he could be there to encourage them from the sidelines.
Cheerleading them on.
Exactly. And it's all about the Pharaoh, really, isn't it?
It's all about the Pharaoh.
El Shaarawy's been absolutely fantastic.
We're talking about.
There's
no hope in hell, surely.
It is Barcelona. It's extremely unlikely.
Yeah, it's extremely unlikely. What is also, it was very funny actually, because they were asking me who I would like Juventus to be paired with. And I say anyone but Real Madrid or Celtic. And I was like, Celtic, why are you upset for Celtic? Now the whole Juventus side, barring Bonucci, of course, who wanted Bernabeu, have wanted Celtic, and they've been praying for that since the minute they... I don't know what it is, but they think that's a side that they can overcome, or it's a smaller team perhaps, or whatever it be. But for me, I'm always wary of these Cinderella stories because I feel like they come back and haunt you. And also Juventus, as we saw against Nordsjælland, struggled. They get a little bit complacent. Do you think there's a hope for Celtic to get past this?
There is a hope for Celtic because they're extremely strong at home and because they beat Barcelona. I mean,
everyone can refer back to that.
There's no getting away from that. What an incredible feat it was, and there's
15% possession and then 2-1, huh?
There's no reason they couldn't do it again. I think you have to look at the way Celtic have finished games in Europe, though, and the way Juventus have finished games in Europe. And the way Juventus have finished games globally, in fact, they can always come on stronger in the last 20 minutes of a game. And I think that's because of the motivation in the squad. I think that's because of the spirit. I think that's because of the fitness. And I think that's because of the different options they have off the bench. Now, they could still probably do that prime strike, and we're talking about this now. They could have Didier Drogba by the time they go into that, who's not cup-tied in the Champions League, we must underline. So I think you've got that, and you've got to juxtapose that against the fact that even though Celtic have done brilliantly, they came on late to win the game in Moscow. They conceded a goal in the last 15 minutes at Benfica. They conceded a goal in the 94th minute at Barcelona after working so hard. And I think they're going to have to put in so much energy to contain Juventus. The last 15-20 minutes is where the game could be won. Certainly in that first leg, and Celtic have to be really careful not to let that happen if they're going to go into the second leg with a chance.
All I think about is, Forrester, and he's just so tall that I think, how can any of the Italians who don't really know how to convert chances manage to get past this giant of a man? But I do think where they do excel is that they're a little bit more direct than Barcelona, and that might cause Celtic a little bit more problems. But then you've got, Malgu could get something from a free kick or a set piece, and then there's of course Hooper being linked with a move to Juventus. Not that he can ever play.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? I missed that one.
I know, Hooper's being linked to Juventus.
Wow.
Drogba looking unlikely because of what he is actually demanding. I still think he reckons himself to be a 26-year-old.
More than a couple of tins of soup.
Let's just say a bit much for someone. And also his club. Long story, but apparently it's not so easy and probably unlikely. But Arsenal, Bayern Munich, they wanted to avoid Barcelona. They got Bayern Munich. I mean, honestly, are they unlucky?
It's very unfortunate for
Are
Arsenal.
they lucky to be there?
Yeah, I think they are a little. They're only very sporadically impressive in the group. They could have lost to Olympiacos at the Emirates, and of course they did lose to them in Piraeus. And that game was really what the group qualification hinged on, as far as Arsenal were concerned. Of course, they've just re-signed these 5 players, so you're thinking there's a bit more stability. They've got work to do. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Defensively, they have work to do against the Bayern Munich side that knows how to score for fun.
Yeah, I think it's about defensive shape, really, for them. You have to worry about them picking up Ribery, picking up Kroos in central areas. I think is a very important one for them. Of course, it'd be interesting to see Lukas Podolski playing against his old club, though. He disappointed so frequently there. We associate him more with Cologne, really. I think it's something that might be slightly overlooked. But Bayern just have to be one of the favourites for the entire competition. This tie always reminds me, though, of when they played each other in 2004-2005, and of course Bayern won quite heavily in the first leg. Arsenal got a goal back late on. Arsenal won the home leg 1-0, but went out 3-2 in aggregate. I just remember the Bayern fans singing in English, "You've never won the European Cup."
Oh, that is so mean.
It is mean, but it's very impressive linguistically.
Well, maybe someone else will teach them a few more sentences this time round.
Keep it clean, please.
Keep it clean. I know that you're probably looking forward to different ones that I'm looking forward to. Valencia PSG is the one that you've picked out.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one.
How so?
Because I think Valencia have got a lot of scope to improve. With the squad they've got. They're looking a bit rudderless in the league at the moment, but they've saved some of their best performances for the Champions League. I think of them battering Bate Borisov home and away. I think of the way they played in the home game against Bayern. They're really excellent in that. And the matchup I'm really looking forward to is Sofiane Feghouli on the right-hand side for Valencia against Maxwell on the left for PSG. Now, he leaves a lot of space behind him, and Fegouli's very, very good on the ball. He can drift inside as well as go outside. He's very quick. And, you know, this is the first time he's going back and playing in France since he left Grenoble. So for him, you know, he's left being a boy as he was when he left Grenoble and become a man now. He's going to want to prove to everyone in France how far he's come. So I think that'll be a really interesting matchup. I think there's a lot for PSG to deal with because, you know, they've looked at all the teams they could have faced and, you know, some of those second place ones, Real Madrid, Shakhtar, they'll probably be quite pleased to avoid. But nevertheless, I think this is a bit trickier than it looks.
You know what, now that, of course, Valencia have a new coach as well.
Yeah.
So that
Valverde knows his way around the European scene, doesn't he? So.
Yeah, but let's be honest, PSG maybe not, they don't turn it on in the league, but they certainly know how to turn it on in the Champions League.
Yeah, especially at the Parc des Princes.
Do you think they can stop Zlatan?
Well, the sort of form that Adil Rami's been in 2012 is going to be tricky. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But I remember Zlatan saying on his initial impressions of France quite recently, he said, the cheek of people here, they kick me. They actually kick me. And when he comes up against Ricardo Costa and Adil Rami, they're not going to shy away from that kind of stuff. So it could be quite an interesting physical battle as well as a technical one.
Well, it'll be certainly a battle, and then of course there is Porto, Malaga, and Galatasaray versus Schalke, which is perhaps the one that everyone is least looking forward to. I don't know why.
Well, apart from the two teams.
Apart from the two teams, of course. But do join us after the break, where we'll take you over to Spain to chat what's happening over there. See you in a bit. Hello and welcome back to the World Football Show here on Sports Tonight Live. And it's somewhat sad news coming out of Spain, considering Tito Vilanova has suffered a relapse and will have to undergo surgery following the return of the cancerous tumour. And from what we understand, it's only a few days in hospital, but then he will have to undergo chemotherapy, and that will, well...
We're looking at about 6 weeks.
6 weeks.
I think, but really it's not about the effect on Barcelona, it's about him
getting
well again, isn't it? Carlos Puyol has been talking about it this morning and said that the operation went really well. And I think that also shows, you know, the togetherness that there is there behind him, that, you know, the players are waiting for news and relaying everything. And, you know, Barcelona's such a collective as well. Now, as we said, Villanova's health is the most important thing. But when people talk about how Barcelona are going to get on, it's not really about individuals, because we focus so much on Lionel Messi. We sometimes forget that, but it's a true collective, and you get the impression they'll be okay.
Yeah, you do get the impression. It's sort of, you know, it's almost like whatever Barcelona suffer as a team, they will always get past it because of how strong the collective is. Of course, the only thing that we should be worried about is Villanova and the fact that Barcelona did come out and say some really wonderful words about him. He has been our coach, he is our coach, and he will continue to be our coach. Obviously, in the meantime, while he is away, then the reins will be passed on to Jordi Arura, who is his assistant now. And you get the feeling that Barcelona will survive regardless of whatever happens to them.
Yeah, I think so, because I think it's not just about Arura coming in, but also the fact that you've got senior players who understand the club so totally. It's a unique club in that sense. The
players could run it. Yeah,
almost. You have that senior committee of players who completely understand how the club works and have done since infants, really. So, you know, you look at Puyol, you look at Xavi, and I think the fact that Puyol, Xavi and Messi, all three of them signed extended contracts this week, I think that's quite significant in terms of, you know, the feeling that the team's in really good hands. And you think, like, Puyol's got a contract extension now that takes him through till, what, 2016? Now, he's 34 years old.
It's amazing.
What other club would that happen? It's
Milan.
Difficult to... but perhaps. But if you think Puyol's, you know, he's someone who's always pushed himself physically to the absolute limit, and he's suffered from that in the last couple of years. You know, you've got the impression that his body's creaking a little bit, and that only really says one thing, doesn't it? That, you know, there's going to be continuity for him going on to be a leader in the club, just like Pep Guardiola did. You know, that's something that's very, very important in Barcelona. You know, taking on that mentality, starting the mentality very, very early, the way they play, the principles they believe in, and just it going on. It's almost a cradle to grave approach. Very interesting.
That's the great thing about Barcelona, perhaps, is their continuation. Of course, everyone did come, well, not everyone, but certain people came out and frustratingly said things about Lionel Messi extending to 2018. Doesn't he want to test himself? Because obviously he's taking a break in Barcelona when they're winning all these championships and being the best team in the world. It's just so easy, because if you have to test yourself, you have to do it in Stoke. What do you think of that? Do you think we'll ever see Messi play for another club?
No, I think it's
Never.
very, very unlikely. And, you know, talk about being Barcelona for life, you know, it's something like people think, you know, he's an Argentinian international, but he's been there since he was 12 years old. You know, and, you know, everyone's heard the stories about when he was a kid and he came over with his father. He was really homesick and used to cry in his room and not let his dad see him because he was so longing for home. But now you can't imagine that. You know,
No.
he's someone who's come to embody the club, who manages to be the best player in the world, but also part of this fully functioning collective, and someone who serves the entire team and the entire team serves him. And you know, it's fascinating, really. You know, and I think if you look at it personally, you know, he's starting his family there. That's obviously very important to him as well. And I don't really understand how people see it as a lack of ambition. That ambition has to be change. That's a very modern viewpoint. You know, that's a very, you know, fast
No, I
food,
agree with you, because I'm not sure.
no attention viewpoint. What about if he became the first guy to win? Well, he's already one of the first guys to win 3 European Cups with Barcelona. What if he went on and won 5, 6,
Okay, but
7?
I think also, you know, as much as I criticise these people who say that, I think there is a certain element of things, because when I do defend Ronaldo and I think of him as one, you know, the best footballer in the world, I always say that this is a man who has performed consistently and at the top level and been amazing and the star of the show in 3 different teams, you know, in different countries, under different managers, with different players. And I think that says a lot about how much, of course, you know, when you compare the two, no one takes that seriously. You know, everyone's like, yeah, well, Messi is still #1. Yes, of course. He really is, because he continues to perform in that way. But then there's Ronaldo. I mean, the fact that he has led, you know, Manchester United to so much glory, that he led Real Madrid. Messi will never really have that.
Coped with people complaining about him at
Yeah, exactly. In
turn,
every place,
despite the
you're
fact
arrogant,
he's constantly
you're this.
delivered. Yeah.
Well, when he comes out and says he wants to be a Hollywood star after he finishes football, you know, you kind of understand where he's coming. I mean, this is a guy who goes racing in the swimming pool with his girlfriend and still won't let her win. Yeah, this is the most competitive man in the planet. But then we can't really ever say that about Messi, because he'll always have that great family around him. So in that way, he will never really experience what it's like to have to make it.
Because there's the sense of him not coming out of a comfort zone, whereas that's not really the way he sees it, and I don't think it's really the way we should see it as well.
Yeah.
Because it's not a comfort zone. The pressure to improve on what he's
already done,
what he's already done, and what Barcelona have already done in
it's
2009,
like now he has to score a brace in every single game.
In 2011, is absolutely extraordinary. So I think to take up that challenge is an incredible thing.
No, it's also, he is with a team that has to continue performing at the highest level, and that will forever be known as one of the greatest club sides to have ever dominated world football. Let's talk about a little bit about Mourinho, who's probably very irritated at all of this. And of course, that bizarre story with him taking a reporter from Radio Marca aside and telling him, you know, I'm this as a coach, I'm the top level coach, and you're rubbish, basically, as a journalist. And
he's never done that before, has he?
Yeah, and of course that player went on, that journalist went on to write the full transcript of what happened. You know, do you think there's a sense of he wanted this to be leaked out?
I don't know. It's easy to say.
3 black sheep. He kept talking about 3 black sheep.
Well, it's easy to say with Mourinho that there's a grand plan, because he's got such incredible.
Devious.
He's thought of as quite devious, and he's got such incredible attention to detail as well. But you know, I think he feels pressure too, and you know, he's someone who's. He's relatively paranoid at the best of times, isn't he? Let's be honest. And you know, you could say part of that he's a product of his environment, because you know in Portugal the culture is to suspect. To suspect referees, to suspect journalists, to suspect other clubs.
Your wife, everything.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. But I think it's about removing attention from him and where his team is in the league at the moment as well. Because we can go on and on about how Villanova has overseen this brilliant Barcelona start, and it is incredible. We have to say it's statistically the best ever start in La Liga. 15 wins and a draw. It's absolutely astonishing. But that doesn't matter to Mourinho. He's way off the pace, and what he's got to do is try and hang on until the Champions League resumes, because it's 2 months away.
Yeah, it is 2 months away. Do join us after the break. Well, we'll move over to other scandals, but those are the match fixing way in Italy. See you after the break. Welcome back to the World Football Show, and now we move on to Italy. Of course, everyone is talking about poor old Napoli.
Poor old Napoli.
Poor old Napoli docked 2 points. Now, Paolo Cannavaro, who is their captain, as well as Gianluca Grava, handed a 6-month suspension for not alerting the authorities about the fact that their former teammate Gianello said to them, do you guys want to fix this match against Sampdoria? They were like, no way, absolutely not, And then they've gone on to receive this punishment with Napoli, despite the fact that they have nothing to do with it as a club, but because Gianello played for them, they are indirectly involved. They, could suffer when it comes to UEFA as well, because the rules dictate that whether you're directly or indirectly involved, you will still be punished. Gianello's gone on to receive 39-month ban.
Although he's not playing at the moment, so it probably doesn't
really matter, exactly. But this is a huge loss, because we're talking about the loss of a captain. A lot of people have come in and said, Lavezzi came out and tweeted saying, I'm with you, my brother, and you will always be a great team and all of this. Do you think this is going to obviously harm them quite a bit?
It is, and I think we've already seen it's harmed them quite a bit, because their form's dipped while this has been
going on,
hanging over them. Of course, they've had the 2 defeats to Bologna this week, which
so you're blaming
we'll come
it on
to
that?
in a minute. Well, I think that's part of it. I think the squad could be stronger, and I think De Laurentiis, we know he's not a president who's shy of drama and spending money, and I'm sure he'll do that in January. He's going to have to spend to replace Cannavaro. There's no doubt about that. Of course, Grava may have some sort of symbolic importance at the club, but to the actual team, it doesn't really make that much difference.
We don't really know what the final thing is
now. No, we don't. But I'm not convinced it'll get reduced much, if at all. I think if we take Conte as precedent, and I think there's quite a strong feeling that, as with what happened to Conte, you don't really get the impression that the right people are getting punished for this.
No.
So you have to look at the system. I think the ways of genuinely rooting out corruption, rather than just ways of being seen to do the right thing in light of past scandals that have happened. I think that's quite an important point.
They're just taking a hard line because of everything that's happened to them. They're basically saying, look, we're not going to tolerate anything anymore. Enough.
But are the right people getting punished?
Probably not, but that's probably why there's been such an outpour of emotion for all of these players. It's a little bit different, I guess, between Conte and these Napoli players. But it is a little bit like Bonucci. There was obviously the case where we thought that was it. 3 years and he would be out, but that didn't happen. So there is a little bit of hope. I mean, Gianello, when he was held to give his testimony, he gave 5 different versions of when he actually asked them to.
That's right, before and after training, and
so perhaps on that they can catch him out. But Napoli obviously now back to fifth place because of this. Everyone is talking about how wonderful Bologna has been against them. Now, Bologna, Stefano Pioli, rather, this is the main point, seems to always win over Walter Mazzarri, and it's been sort of like a nemesis. Mazzarri hates facing him. And now De Laurentiis has come out and spoken about how wonderful Pioli is as a coach, possible replacement for Mazzari in the future. But I mean, Bologna, surely we should be applauding how well they always do against Napoli. Or
well, to win twice at the San Paolo in less than a week is absolutely astonishing. And we can say like Napoli are at a low ebb at the moment, and of course they'll have to regroup and use this as a strength and come back because they need at least Champions League.
Yeah.
And you know, I think there's openness to do that, seeing as there's a gap between Juventus and the rest. But Bologna have done incredibly, especially when you think how they started the season looking quite attractive but not really getting the results. So to come a little bit up the table, and of course it has played into their hands a little bit. There's Siena down there at the bottom that have lost a whole stack of points. That other teams have been in poor form. But you know, I think we're seeing now the wisdom in some of their pickups. Of course, Gilardino, it always looked as if, you know, it was a surprisingly big signing for them in terms of quality. Manuel Gabbiadini, he's been really important coming on loan.
But it's all about him, isn't he?
Yeah, well, of course, you know, he's a very important player in what he can provide technically and the sort of leadership and heart he can give as well. But really, when we're talking about these two games, we have to talk about Kone's 2 goals in both those.
You want to get a tattoo after that?
Well, I think he wants to get an extra one. I mean, you have to do something to commemorate that, and that was magnificent to come back and do it 4 days later. The one in the league game was the bicycle kick.
Oh, the beautiful one.
Absolutely extraordinary.
Unbelievable.
The net is still crying.
The net is still crying. Well done, Bologna. I mean, they came back, 2 goals in the last 5 minutes of the match. A team that isn't doing very well is, of course, Sampdoria, and they ended up sacking their coach, Ciro Ferrara. Which I think that, you know, they did hold on to him for 7 defeats in a row. I think there's only so much. Alongside him, you know, their sporting director, Pasquale Sensibile, is also gone. Delio Rossi, the man everyone remembers as the guy who hit the Fiorentina player, Adam do you pronounce it for
Adam
me?
Ljajic.
That's it.
I think it's fair to say he won't be signing him on loan in January.
No, he won't be signing him on loan.
However many players Fiorentina have got, I think it's fair to say.
But what an amazing replacement. Delio Rossi, highly respected for his attacking play, probably not for his defensive approach. Sorry, rather lack of defence.
Yeah, he really is. And I think it's good that he's got back into the game. He made a mistake and a pretty bad one, but you know he's suffered in the last couple of years. Like of course, being under Zamparini is not ideal for anyone.
It's not his holiday.
And then what happened at Fiorentina when you had the impression he was, you know, maybe on the edge of some sort of breakthrough. I mean, it's worked out really well for Fiorentina in the end. I don't think you can argue with that. Though he's essentially a good coach, and I think there's an opportunity if they put a run together to pull away, because I think there are a lot of weak teams in the bottom 6 or 8 this season.
Yes.
So, you know, a little boost from having a new coach, from having some new ideas could help them pull away.
Oh, they do have quite a good squad. Of course, the man who did get them promoted from Serie B last season was Beppe Iacchini. He is now in charge of Siena, who decided to sack their coach rather unfairly, in my opinion, says Cosmi, of course known for his flat caps and bizarre movements on the sidelines. But Chiellini is out as well, suffered a huge injury and might be out for 2 to 3 months, which is, you can't say something.
Yeah, it's a real blow, because he's the player who most helps them commute between 3 and 4 at the back as well. So when we're talking about Juventus having all those options, and you know, he's a key part of that.
He is a key part, but that is unfortunately all we have time for. But do join us next week, because we have a special roundup of the year 2012, and we'll be joined by Andy Brassell again and Raphael Honigstein. But until then, wishing you a Merry Christmas from both me and Andy. See you.